morning. Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 24th February 2026. Now, in studio, I have Sheila Lang, who is the development economist. Good morning.
Morning, Sam. How are you?
I'm all right. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Hujakuwa ground, we see a lot of activities going on in this country.
Tuko ground. Define ground.
Oh, okay.
Tuko ground.
you know, lately there are different terms. Kuna Linda Mwananchi, Linda ground.
Yeah.
Linda Mama
Linda
Elisha.
Ndoa.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, Linda wanafunzi.
Tulinde demokrasia.
Tulinde demokrasia.
Atuweka mawe.
Kamawe.
Anyway, now we're still expecting the arrival of Gitonga Mukunji from Manyata and Diana Gishengo from the Institute of Social Accountability. Senator Hilary Sigei sends his apologies. He's unable to come because he lost his voice between yesterday and this morning. But the show continues. The front page of the Daily Nation is about what's killing Kenyans, and you'll see the statistics there that 40% deaths now are attributed to non-communicable diseases. We are talking about ailments like heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and mental health conditions, and also now it is at par with infectious diseases, also accounting for 40% of the deaths. And this is quite an evolution of the statistics. If you had to look at what was happening in 1990, 75% of deaths then were infectious diseases. You've made a lot of investment in dealing with that. You look at 2010 years later, the infectious diseases were accounting for 65% and 22% of deaths were non-communicable diseases. Then that has transitioned. Every other 10 years has been a decline of about 10% to currently stand at 40% contribution by infectious diseases and 40% by non-communicable diseases. And of course, experts warning of challenges that come with chronic illnesses, that despite the life expectancy climbing to 67 years, you find the burden of NCDs is quite a problem in the country. And of course, it comes at a cost because of the long-term management of such conditions and obviously how it ends. Then opposition steps up pressure on Kenya Kwanza in Gusii tour is also one of the main stories on the front page of the Daily Nation. The United Opposition leaders swept through Bomet, Kisii and Nyamira counties and telling President Ruto to read the warning signs that his time in the presidency was up. Party chiefs Rigathi Gachagua, Kalonzo Musyoka, Eugene Omalo and Fred Matiang'i asked Rift Valley and Nyanza residents to back their cause. And then you find that story of shameless CSs, mining CS Hassan Joho and his energy counterpart Opiyo Wandayi in action at ODM rallies over the weekend would have easily been mistaken for ODM youth wingers. That was 2 days after Treasury CS John Badi hosted Luo elders at the ministry's boardroom and discussed ODM affairs. They aren't alone. Some of this administration CSs consistently flout sections of the Leadership and Integrity Act on political neutrality, exploit a thin line between publicizing government policies and hot politics, and end up turning the spirit of the law into a joke. And you see some of the faces there, including Geoffrey Ruku, who is the Public Service Cabinet Secretary, was appointed last year upon the firing of former CS and Attorney General Justin Muturi. Then the image of United Opposition storms Gusii land is also one of the stories that is on the Standard. Let's talk a little bit about the headline on the Standard, Sheila, and it was also part of our stories that we've run this morning of CSs going all out to talk about the politics of 2027. Never mind, it's just about 16 to 17 months before that election. What should Kenyans do? Because it looks like all of us are in full campaign mode.
Yes, Sam, I think you're right. It's quite unfortunate in many ways. Many Kenyans get very worried when we're seeing that we have cabinet secretaries that are so heavily involved in politics.
Yeah.
Mine is always just to say that, following the rule of law at all times, even when it doesn't favor you, is quite important. I think it's the enforcement agency who is supposed to check them is the big question.
Yeah.
And this is what happens when you really don't have a clear balance of power. That you have this. And I'm also sometimes curious to see that sometimes it is just some CSs, and then you have others who you see them not being involved at all in the politics, and I wonder what they're doing or where they are. And who is supposed to check them? Is it Parliament? Is it Ethics and Anti-Corruption? Who is supposed to make sure that they're not doing this, and what do they have to say about this? I think we need to be sometimes a bit careful with blatantly violating some of these laws.
Right.
It's good now when it's on your side, and then when it flips to the other side, then we had people who have previously complained about this kind of interference. So let's try to also tone down political rhetoric a little bit. I always worry that we're going to have voter apathy because Kenyans will be a bit fatigued by politics.
Yeah.
There's a reason why I think the Constitution made it so that there was a window that we could be on full-blown or full mode of politics. And just work for people. I mean, I think as long as you're able to give what I always call a report card, you can say, I'm the CS of X, Y, and Z, and I can show that I have delivered, this product and that product, you will automatically be voted back in, and you will help the government of the day that you're working with.
Right.
And so I think the cabinet secretaries should focus on helping President Ruto deliver his second term by simply working for Kenyans. That's one way to do it, instead of seeming like they are, violating the law. That's
right.
For me, that would be the best way to help President Ruto secure his second term, by actually delivering to Kenyans.
Right. And, this is happening. Of course, the attention is, for now, on the cabinet secretaries. But you look at the other leaders, including county governors, that you'd actually be forgiven to imagine that we have all suspended governance because you find governors, they're governors for a reason, governors to govern. But they are busy with political activities. They are one rally today, another one in a totally different town. I mean, how do services continue to run?
I think sometimes that's an interesting question. We've had a lot of Kenyans who are asking themselves the same question. What time do you have to go back to your county and govern them? Some governors hold two different hats. So you find that within the political party, they could be, in the case of ODM, for example, you have a governor who's also the chairperson of a political party. And so I can imagine that her mandate lies between doing both, both roles. And how do we then balance this and ensure that the governance part of the governor's job is actually being enforced? Is it that duties are delegated and they're going well? I think for me, it really boils down to the fact that in 2027, the grassroots level of change that we're going to see, that's where the bread and butter is. So I would urge a lot of leaders that deliver to the people who mandated you to deliver to them. Your first boss is not even your career. Your first boss is the Kenyan people. Your first boss is the people that you govern in that county. Deliver to them. Then it doesn't matter what you do politically. They will always, be graceful enough to bring you back in. But if we politic too much and we are not focusing on development, politics is supposed to be a means towards development. But now if we're enjoying the politics more than we're enjoying what it's supposed to lead us to, then yeah, we have a big crisis.
That's interesting because we're at that point that it's become a situation of memes, and people appear to be enjoying it too much. But then what does this do? Because like you're saying, governors are supposed to be doing their work, but what does it do to a populace that you go to an election, after a short time you're back at competing voices, almost a year and a half or even more than that before the election, you're now again thinking about, so what shall we do in the next election? Like the psyche of the nation, and even for them to work for their own lives, because lives don't stop.
I hope that we have a way of resolving this post-2027. You can see since 2022, it's been a non-stop we're almost on a hamster wheel, politically speaking. You get elected, and then immediately you are thrown into how am I securing my next coalition, my next re-election. And the problem with doing this is what time do you have to actually work and deliver to the people? You're a human being. I mean, it's only human that you cannot be full-time on the campaign trail and, at the same time, full-time delivering the services that you actually put in place. And if you look at the Constitution actually thought about this. That's why they had a window, a very specific window, where then you are allowed to go full-blown out in campaign, because it said that the people who have been elected needed time to actually focus and deliver to the people that they're focusing on. Right. Political fatigue, there's many studies that have shown that voters get politically fatigued if they're constantly politicking and they don't have time, where the voters also need to see that leaders need time to deliver on the mandate that they were given before then, they go back into the field and they go back and politic. So for those who have been elected, your job is to actually deliver. Mm-hmm. For those who are not elected, even if they want to politic throughout, fair, they have a right to assembly, and they can discuss and they can critique and they can give feedback and whatever it is. And so I hope we resolve this, because many Kenyans are feeling like the political class is extremely out of touch. And unfortunately, sometimes when you look at these politics, are they actually addressing the Kenyan needs today? You see, kids are going to school, they're being asked a lot of cash. There's now a new trend where you are asked cash for uniforms. If you have children in school, the new way is, don't pay school fees, but then they need cash, and every school is now selling their own school uniforms. Yep. What is being done about that? The president the other day pronounced that no child should be kicked out of school. Yes, children are being kicked out of school for not paying cash for school uniforms. It's still happening in many places. So, I mean, even as much as you politics, Kenyans see wajinga, it's like their day-to-day lives are not improving. So I think the political class really needs to go back to the drawing board and take time to demonstrate to us how they're delivering to Kenyans.
I'm looking at the Conflict of Interest Act of 2025, mm-hmm. Section 25 on political neutrality. Just listen to it, what Parliament passed. That an appointed public officer, other than a cabinet secretary or a member of a county executive committee, shall not, in the performance of his duties or her duties, act as an agent for or further the political interest of a political party or political candidate, shall not manifest support for or opposition to any political interests of a political party or political candidate, and shall not engage in political activity that may compromise or be seen to compromise the political neutrality of his or her office. But interestingly, CSs and CECs are exempted from this requirement.
What about PSs?
It doesn't mention PSs.
Okay.
Yeah, but of course, PSs have been active also at different...
I think everybody has been active. It's not fair to even single out the CSs themselves. I think there's many people who are busy violating that act. And it's interesting that CSs are exempt from this. But, it's of course, they are some of the top guns, so we are pointing them out. But there's many people along that food chain that are really politically active. Everybody's just politically active. And we need to have a sober conversation as Kenyans. And when they go to those rallies, it's not like the CSs are talking to themselves, right? We as Kenyans are also there. So, I mean, and I always say that the leaders we are seeing in front of us, they are a reflection of our own choices. So we also need to have a conversation. It's easy for us to keep pointing fingers at them, but they are a reflection of our own choices as Kenyans, mm-hmm. Right?
All right, okay. Then obviously there's that conversation, and of course we'll touch on it a little bit more. The United Opposition storming Gusii land, and also the story on the Daily Nation, opposition steps up pressure on Kenya Kwanza and Gusii tour. I don't know what your thoughts are, especially when it comes to the very heavy rhetoric we are hearing from the political spaces that is also turning chaotic and violent at some time. I read somewhere about that someone needs to do a study on the goon economy in Kenya, because very soon I think we're going to be overshadowed by hired or paid actors when we're doing politics. First of all, it's quite unfortunate that we live in a country where we have a right to peacefully assemble. I mean, that is something that is enshrined in the Constitution. And actually
part of the 10-point agenda, if you remember very well, somebody like the late Raila Odinga was really pushing that the right to peaceful assembly was something that must be guarded and must be protected as part of our democracy. Now, that being said, you see that factions on both ends, they're choosing not to use legal means.
Yeah.
You have instances where police literally observe as Kenyans are being tear gassed or being hurt. We've had instances where police, they're being accused of being the ones orchestrating the violence, such as the case of the church in Othaya. The other day, I saw that the government was saying that the Linda Mwananchi team is purchasing tear gas and then, throwing them on themselves. I mean, we need to really call ourselves back to the table and go back to the drawing board. There's countries that started this way, and those kind of paramilitary, those goon groups, ended up being a big problem in their countries in the end.
Yep.
We've seen places such as Iraq, for example, that just started off as like, yes, let's use means that are outside the law in order to deal or intimidate people on one side or the other. And then it turned out that they actually became more powerful than the legal order itself. So we need to be extremely careful with what we do about this. Mm-hmm. Every Kenyan is, of course, if you follow the correct channels, you have a right to peacefully assemble. You are supposed to notify the authorities, and once you notify them, then you're supposed to peacefully assemble. But when we have a case where I'm seeing that it's now even going into university students, where university students are now being hired. You're hired here to either stop a meeting from happening, disrupt a meeting from happening, or whatever the case is. And you keep asking yourself, well, where is the police? Where is the government in all of this? Because if we don't call ourselves to order, then we're going to have a big problem very soon. Gangs and goons will run around offering services that are supposed to be provided for by the government itself.
That's risky.
That's very risky.
But it's possible. Mm-hmm. Now, Diana Gishengo is joining us. She's the Executive Director of the Institute of Social Accountability. Good morning, Diana.
Good morning, Ms. Sam. Happy New Year. We're still in the first quarter.
Oh, wow. Almost the end of February, but Happy New Year then. We'll take a short break here. When we come back, we dive into the conversation. Two key issues that we want to talk about. First is the ongoing conversation. The County of Nairobi has entered into a cooperation agreement with the national government. There will be 14 days running from last week for the members of the public to express themselves. It's some form of public participation. What do they have to say? What are the concerns? What should you be thinking about as you engage with the county assembly or the authorities that are calling for this public participation? We'll also talk a bit about the politics of the country and where we're headed. Gitongo Mukunji, Member of Parliament for Manyata constituency, we're still expecting him. As soon as he's here, he'll join the panel. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment.